Well, welcome back to the Reality Halfway House. Kind of frog in my throat, right? Just opening up the mic. Well, today is episode 20, and I'm going to kind of celebrate a little bit because they say most podcasts usually don't get like 2 or 3 episodes in, so we're already at episode 20. So today I thought we'd talk about something kind of fun, the zombie apocalypse. You know, and years ago that used to be something just kind of lore, but as the world gets weirder and weirder out there, it gets stranger and stranger and potentially more probable. We are caught between worlds. This is the Reality Halfway House. I'm your host, Jones Nelson. Yeah, episode 20 today. Starting it off with a frog in my throat. Boy, how excellent and apropos is that? No, thank you so much to everyone that has kind of been along on this journey. I've appreciated the comments. I've appreciated the DMs. It's interesting. In Nashville, we lived in Nashville for a while. I talked a little bit about that in the last episode of kind of how we moved out there, but they say Nashville is a 10-year town. I'm not sure what it is today, but when we moved there 12 years ago, they said, yeah, it's a 10-year town. If you want to make it in this business, it's going to take you about 10 years. Well, podcasting is seemingly has some sort of a payment for entry, if you will. Kind of that proverbial, kind of payment of entry to where you have to go through so much before you start getting noticed. I've talked to several podcasters and I've watched several podcasters say that, man, we're out there like just day after day, nobody's listening. And it's interesting in the last 24 hours, I've seen a pretty significant uptick on some of the media, which I don't fully claim to understand. I guess the adage is just start talking and we'll see what happens. But with all the craziness that's going on, we talked about Gary, Indiana. Now they're, over 2 weeks without power. I did a little short video on it, and it really kind of, well, for me, it went viral. Now, what's interesting is the comments that people are leaving on these videos, and they're talking about how they're like, yeah, man, there's no way that we would be able to last and millions of people will die, et cetera, et cetera. Some people are saying, hey, you know what? We actually need and want this. This should happen everywhere. Wherever you fall into scope in that. And somebody's like, why would you want the power to go out? Well, we talked about this a lot all throughout this throughout this podcast in the last 20 episodes about some great big impending event, right? I was just listening to something earlier today with Nino Rodriguez and Bo Ponley. They were talking about Dolly Parton actually being a prophetic sign that this is going to be a marker and things are going to start to escalate and heat up. I don't know. Again, you kind of got to take everything with a grain of salt. But what I find fascinating, though, is that as we're coming up quickly on a big event, I kind of feel like it's almost like intrinsic with an event like that you would kind of expect there to be a loss in power. And some people in the comments were saying, oh, well, Gary, Indiana is just a test to see how we'll do it. Well, I think COVID overall was a test to see how submissive we would be and how we'd react to, being shut down and experimental jabs and the whole 9 yards. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like we've been under a kind of a continuous set of tests, if you will, over the last several years. All that to say is that if the power does go down and you have to basically switch from living in the 21st century to, basically trying to live like the Amish, which they would miss a beat. I've thought about that a lot. If suddenly all of society collapsed and the power went out, the Amish would be like, it's Tuesday. What's going on? What? Like it's, what, what's going on? Like they just wouldn't miss a beat. They just keep on trucking. But for the vast majority of us, we're going to have a really difficult time. And, it's funny because all throughout science fiction and horror flicks and everything else for years and years and years, there's been this kind of concept of a zombie within the zeitgeist. And, there's a lot of different variations on kind of what that looks like. Typically, the archetype or the trope is that, there's this like virus that goes through and it makes people stupid and, they now crave to eat brains and they run around killing and da-da-da-da. I mean, there's a lot of different variations of that. Even the Planet of the Apes movies, we were watching that. It's like there was the virus that went out that made the apes smart and that made all the human beings dumb. You could almost purport that, or you could almost say that that would make zombies. They called them the echoes. The apes called them the echoes, like of what they used to be, I guess. All that to say, it all sounds fantastic. And we've all lived in this world up until this point to where it's like, oh, well, that's just a fantasy. But, even as of this year, you actually have a government in Texas that put out a pamphlet that talks about the zombie attack. Yeah. They said, and I'm just kind of perusing here on their website. This is mysanantonio.com. It says a trip to your local tax office is typically not exciting. Somehow, though, you're there in the middle of workday and there's a long line. The lines aren't too bright, but they've just put out, as of earlier this year, this was, I believe it was March of 2026. Yeah, March of 2026. The Johnson County Tax Office in Burleson, Texas, put out a pamphlet on how to prepare for a zombie attack. Like, in 2026, they're telling, like a governmental office. Okay, now sandwich that and prepare that, or kind of juxtapose that with what the White House is doing with portals and time travel and all kinds, like gray aliens, Nordic aliens, all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's getting to the point to where it's like, okay, you want to throw everything out, right? The baby with the bathwater, to use that old colloquialism there. But everything is getting to the point where it's so weird that it's like, is there validity to some of this stuff? And furthermore, some of you probably shouting at the radio speakers, the podcast, but whatever, the speakers, that the CDC actually put out, and this was, I gotta switch to my other screen. This goes all the way back to 2011 when they put this out. Stacks.cdc.gov, Preparedness 101, the zombie pandemic, and they put out like a comic book, if you will, kind of like where they're talking about being prepared. But the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, is putting out information on zombie apocalypse. So what's the deal? Is it a flesh-eating virus, a brain-eating virus that goes through and does it? Or is it just the breakdown and the collapse of society? Because you know what's interesting? I mean, we see what happens to people just on a regular, Black Friday, where you go in and people are like acting like animals so that they can go through and get, $20 off of a flat screen TV. What's going to happen when the grid goes down? What's going to happen when those same people who have not been preparing, putting away food and water, now suddenly have to feed themselves and their kids? What's going to happen? I mean, if they're going to turn into an animal over, $20 off of a flat screen TV, what are they going to do when it actually comes to their survival? So is it actually even a flesh-eating virus? Or is it just simply the breakdown of society that causes people to revert back to this animalistic way of behaving? And I would submit to you that the latter there is probably the most realistic option. Sure, there's always the possibility. I mean, what have they said? Bill Gates and Fauci and everybody else is like, oh yeah, there's definitely going to be another pandemic. It's like, well, sounds like you've got it all figured out there, right? Well, the thing is, I mean, could they go through and cook something up like that? Yeah. Could something like that occur? Yeah, but I think it's probably most likely that people will revert back to extremely animalistic behavior when they're basically pushed up against the walls, because we're animals at the end of the day. I mean, you can go through and say whatever you want. What has that old like Donald Duck cartoon from like the 50s or 60s? It's like we're all the human animal, like Disney Channel years ago. We're just a human animal, and we've been living civilized or living civilly for a long time with each other. But the second that our sense of normalcy kind of breaks down, then all that kind of goes out the window. And I suspect, and a lot of the people that have listened to my video have said, it's going to happen within a matter of a couple of days. As a matter of fact, I asked the AI and said, hey, what should you do if there's a zombie outbreak? And I just thought this was interesting because I just asked Google, so this is just the Google AI. It says in the first hours of a zombie outbreak, stay calm, lock your doors, silence your phone, and fill all containers with water. Avoid dense cities, gather a non-perishable food, medical supplies, and a quiet weapon, and plan to move to a secure remote location. This is Google. Now again, there's there's a lot of conjecture out there, and I think that it's like, again, we were talking about yesterday, you can prepare all you want physically. You can have all kinds of water and food, but if somebody comes in and breaks in and steals all your stuff, then all that stuff that you thought that you were all set is all gone. What's Mike Tyson say? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. I don't think people can wrap their heads around something like this, but I still think it's fun to entertain. I say fun. I'm being incredibly tongue-in-cheek, given that things are getting weirder and weirder out there. Google says the immediate actions in the first 24 hours, you want to stay quiet, turn your phone to silent, assuming that the phones are even working for that matter. Turn off bright lights, noise, and light attract it says noise and light attract the infected, secure water, fill sinks, tubs, bottled waters immediately, inventory supply, gather all food, choose a weapon. They say a melee weapon. Or my kids say a melee weapon. Short-term moves, this is days 2 through 7. You want to avoid crowds in cities. Urban centers concentrate the highest number of infected and face rapid utility collapses. Armor up if you must venture out. Wear heavy, layered clothing, leather gloves, or makeshift padding like hockey gear to prevent bites. Relocate safely. Move during low visibility hours using paper maps rather than main highways, aiming for rural or elevated terrain. And then long-term survival, this is going to be beyond that week mark. You want to establish a stronghold, fight in defense, remote base near natural clean water, grow and forage, maintain health, et cetera, et cetera. I find this fascinating because all of this is kind of alluding to the fact that you've got an infected populace, but I think you could just really safely layer in just a societal collapse on top of this. Because again, if people did not prepare, or after the raids have happened, because see, here's the thing, it says avoid, like urban city centers. Well, shoot, look at what's happening today now. And again, I'm not pointing fingers at races or any of that kind of thing, but we have seen animalistic behavior within all of humanity, especially over the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, I would submit to you that we've seen some of the best of humanity, but we've definitely seen some of the worst of just humanity in general. And, again, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone in particular, but I think it's important for us to look at each other and say, okay, man, we have to acknowledge that there is, kind of like what the Bible describes, this division of the sheep and the goats, the wheat and the tares. There is a divide that's happening among people today, just like the Bible talks about in the book of Matthew, where you have this separation of the wheat and the tares, the parable. And the thing is, there has to be this division because it is this overarching separation. Now, we've talked about NPCs all throughout this. I've often thought, well, maybe the zombie apocalypse is just the NPCs that have short-circuited and they're just going to go do their thing. And maybe that's the case. I don't know. I just think, because I saw something the other day that I thought was interesting. They've said if you've just been paying attention just over the last couple of years in particular, you've seen multiple people in places of prominence just kind of short circuit. There's that famous clip of Katy Perry. She's up on stage and her eye appears to just stop working. It's like it mechanically malfunctioned. And she was like poking at it and prodding at it until finally it came up. And then we've seen in the news constantly the looks of rubber masks. We've seen like really mechanized and mechanically looking people, like weird stuff that really belongs in a comic book, not in our day-to-day life. I saw something the other day. It was the day before yesterday. It was a story, and it was talking about this lady. She'd been married to this guy for, I think, over a decade. I mean, they've shared their life together. And one day that they were sitting at the dinner table, and he just started acting really funny. And he yelled at her and then, like, pulled back and it was like he was having a problem. He said, "What's wrong with me?" and then collapsed on the floor. So it's almost like he was having a stroke, right? I mean, he just started to malfunction. There was something going on, and he collapsed on the floor. Well, she called 911, and this other team showed up. It wasn't 911. It was this other group that showed up and said, "Look, you're actually married to a robot." I'm summing it up, but you're married to a robot, and we can turn it back on for you if you'd like. But yeah, I mean, we've released X amount of these out into the public just to see kind of an experiment of how it would happen. And yeah, you've been married to a robot. And again, this sounds like something out of the Twilight Zone. And even like 5 or 10 years ago, I'd be like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And yet our president's like posting Rick and Morty like videos about the White House. You've got Iran posting Lego videos about the war. Like, again, that's not the weirdest thing I've heard this year. Oh, yeah, you've been married to a robot for the last 10 years. How is that any less weird than like the president walking with like a 7-foot-tall gray alien? Or he's like hanging out with these like, I don't know, Nordic people. Like, how do you, like, that's not even like outside of the realm of weird, which is insane to me. Like, I just never thought that we would get to this point in my lifetime. I mean, it's very clear that we're towards the end of something. I don't know. You know, I used to think, well, because I grew up in church and they would always say, well, you know, Jesus is going to come back someday. And it's going to be the end of Revelation, and you kind of follow this whole thing. And then there's going to be a rapture, they say. All of that stuff is going to be a future episode. I actually am working on trying to talk a buddy of mine to get into it, but to just kind of tease that aspect a little bit. I actually think that we're beyond Revelation, the beginning of Revelation, or actually closer towards the end. I believe that we're in Satan's little season is my opinion of this. And I actually kind of came to that conclusion several years ago. I'm going to do a whole show on it at some point. I was just reading through the Bible, and I was just like, wait a minute. Jesus actually said, he's like, look, there's some of you that were standing here right now. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but he said, there's some of you standing here that will not taste death before you see the Son of Man coming. Okay, well, so there's some people in there that are over 2,000 years old, or he already came back. And as I started tugging at that thread and digging into it, it's like, oh man, not only did he say that, but there's multiple verses that go through and corroborate that. And then when you look back through history, again, like I said, we're going to get into it. But I think what's interesting about all this and how this ties back into zombie apocalypses and all sorts of kind of stuff, I do believe that Jesus did come back. And I do believe that we are living in the little season. I think there's a lot of information out there that corroborates that point. But I think that because we are in this little season of deception, that they're simply going through and deceiving people at a very massive scale. We can see that starting to exacerbate and intensify just over the last 5 or 6 years. Since COVID in particular, it started to just get more and more and more intense. Obviously, the internet, social media, TikTok, all that stuff, it really intensifies. Like I'm seeing today, I post videos all the time, and I've been on radio forever and ever. I've had a couple of things, go viral. I've had never like to a huge extent. I've had a few songs that have, picked up a few 100,000 plays here or there, but I wouldn't say anything to write home about necessarily. But it's fascinating to me to watch how the mechanism will go through and kind of it's like it becomes self-feeding. It like grows its own set of legs at some point and just takes off with it. And this is kind of both good and bad, because you're having this opportunity for disinformation. Again, I just said a woman was married to a robot just a little bit ago. I don't know if that's true or not. I read about it, or I saw a video about it rather, a couple of days ago. Could it be? I don't know. I mean, I think that it's important for us to continually ask these questions, right? But as things get weirder and weirder, like, I think the possibility of things becoming improbable is decreasing. In other words, the the likelihood that there are things that are probable are dramatically increasing. The podcast I was just listening to with Nino Rodriguez and Bo Ponley, Nino just was like, dude, I can't even believe that we're even doing this podcast. He says that the fact that you're using Dolly Parton's death as a marker and like prophecy is insane to me. And the reality of it is that, if you read the book of Revelation, it gets pretty insane. Jesus said, dude, look, when it all happens, he said it's going to be like it was in the days of Noah. Well, if you look back and kind of understand that in the days of Noah, I mean, it was pretty wild. I mean, there was like chimeric stuff, especially if you go through and you read the apocryphal text. I mean, it goes into a lot greater depth on kind of what went on during that time, the flood, and what, like, how he had the animals and everything, like Noah and the flood. I mean, that gets a lot greater depth than what you see in Genesis. So I think that with where we're at right now with this notion of a zombie apocalypse, I think that they've made it, is my personal opinion, I think that they've made it about something external, like a virus or something like that, when really and truly it could just be the way people are reacting. Because think about it this way, and I talked about this actually last night. This is part of the video that's going viral. It's like, are you mentally and spiritually prepared for a grid shutdown? And I think that is the thing that would potentially cause a zombie apocalypse. Because you've got people, for example, that are Gen Z, and I'm picking on Gen Z for a second, but most of Gen Z have lived their entire life with a device in their hand. That's it. They haven't had to, like, worry about retaining knowledge because they just can look it up anytime they need it. I saw something the other day that said there are so many of these kids now in college that are not writing their papers. They're using AI to write everything, to the point where these kids are going to college and they're not even doing the research to write the papers. They're not reading the material because they've got the phone in their pocket or they've got AI or something else to look it up for them. Now, I'm guilty. I just read off of Google. I just Googled this and I was just reading it off to you. I mean, I use it all the time. But at the same token, it's like I did a lot of research papers with the Encyclopedia Britannica. So there's a lot of useless and useful knowledge rattling around in there that I'm very concerned that the younger generations just don't have. And here's the thing. I'm not even blaming them for it. If I had grown up that way, I would do the same thing, right? If I didn't have to write a research paper with the Encyclopedia Britannica, I wouldn't have done it. Are you kidding me? It'd be so much nicer. It became so much nicer when you could get on the internet and look things up. Again, not faulting them for it, but if the grid goes down, what becomes them? Like, what becomes of these people? And think about all the people my age and older that have really started kind of like leaning really heavily. When I was growing up, we remembered our friends' phone numbers. Now today we struggle to, like, I know my wife's number. I do not know my son's phone number. I've got him saved in my phone, but I don't know what it is. And that's crazy. Like, that's crazy. I still remember my childhood phone number, but outside of that, it's like, what sort of information are we retaining? And I think that this is by design, because you can go through and create this zombie apocalypse by simply making zombies. People that have all of their intelligence and their consciousness existing outside their body in their devices. Think about that. You've literally removed their brains. And when you shut off their external brain, the zombie apocalypse begins. And again, I don't think it's a virus that necessarily has to go through and to trigger it. But I think if you look back over these rules and just to kind of, because I think they're good rules, hopefully it's not one of those things that occurs to this extent. A lot of the prophecy suggests that God's going to take care of it, and it's not going to be like this. And I just hope and pray that that's the case, because this sounds miserable. But like they said, in the first 24 hours, secure water, stay quiet, find a melee weapon. Short term, avoid the crowds in cities. I would definitely do that. I think if you look over the last 5 or 6 years, God has moved people out of the big cities. We used to live in Nashville, and God moved us to a small town in Alabama. You know what I mean? And what's wild, in our town, There have been so many people that have relocated here from other bigger cities, and when you ask them about it, they're like, how'd you end up here? They're like, it was the weirdest thing, man. Like, I had this opportunity come up, or I had a friend that called me up, or a family member, and we just relocated. There's so many people. I cannot tell you how many people that I have encountered in our small town that moved here under extremely like weird circumstances. And when I've prayed into it, God's told me, he said, look, you're going to kiss the ground that you live where you live when all this goes down. And what I'm talking about is, and what the prophets are talking about, is the great and terrible day of the Lord. That mentions that in Joel 3. You can go look that up, the great and terrible day of the Lord. It's supposed to be a 24-hour period is what they say, when the angel of the Lord, the angel of death, gets on the earth and basically wipes out all the bad guys. What they have said specifically, I'm referring to the prophets, and a lot of different prophets have said this, that they're going to be wiping out the Nephilim. Okay, and the Nephilim, if you don't know, is a hybrid between the fallen angels and man. And in the days of old, especially in the Old Testament, you can look this up in Genesis 6. It goes into where there were giants in the earth, great men of renown. It was a bloodline. And so when Noah was chosen, he was chosen because he was, quote, pure in his generations, his genes. He was genetically pure. At least that's how that's interpreted, and pretty widely accepted. So Noah was actually pure in his generations, which means that when he was selected, God was going through and selecting somebody. This is, again, widely accepted. This is not just me going through and rattling on my own here. That Noah was accepted because he was a pure specimen. And that's not unique, too. If you look throughout the Old Testament, you see tons and tons of selections of like the pure, spotless animals. You see in Revelation the pure and spotless bride. Having a pure specimen is very important all throughout. And Noah himself was pure in his generations, because there was a lot of tinkering going on, which is why I think Jesus is also saying, he's like, look, it's going to be like it was in the days of Noah. There's going to be a lot of tinkering going on. Well, gosh, man. I mean, we're seeing that all over the place right now. Again, there's a lot of different things Jesus could mean by that. You can argue in the comments, et cetera, et cetera. But suffice it to say is I truly do believe we are in a period of great deception, which I think corroborates with Jesus having already returned. And again, I'm going to do an entire show just on that, probably several shows, because I think I came to that conclusion probably about 5 years ago when I was reading through the Bible. And it's been in the last couple of years that it's started to become mainstream. And I haven't been talking about it. I mean, among close friends, sure, but the topic itself has become more and more mainstream. There's a guy, you can follow him and go check him out. He's called JT follows JC. He talks all about the millennial reign already having happened and so forth. And he does a great job. He's actually... I've been following him now for the last several years, but I had come to terms. I say me. I feel like the Holy Spirit really led me to this understanding early when I was going through and reading, and it felt dirty, like it felt blasphemous. It felt gross, because I was always raised that there's going to be a rapture and all this other kind of stuff, and that we're going to be beamed out of here, Scotty, and that's how it was going to go. But really and truly, when you start getting into it and digging into the rapture is not even in the Bible. It was introduced in the footnotes by John Nelson Darby in the Schofield Bible. You can go look that up as well. But again, like I said, we're going to do another show on that. But I think that this is all important because in a time of great deception, which is, again, what I believe that we're in, the short season, the little season, and I believe we're getting close to winding this down. I don't know the date, the time, or the hour. Nobody does. But I think we're getting close. I really think that we're getting close. Like Bo Pony said today, Dolly Parton passing away was a marker, and it's supposed to get more and more wild from here. Nino Rodriguez has been talking about how, and he's been saying this for months, that he doesn't believe that there's going to be midterm elections. So, I mean, he said that. You had, oh gosh, what's his name? I can't think of the guy's name. Big podcaster got put in jail. his my it'll hit me here in just a second. I can't think of his name, but big podcaster also said, and I just can't think of the guy's name. Forgive me. He said he didn't believe there was going to be midterms as well. So suffice it to say is that we're building and building and building to something. Kim Clement, who was a prophet like 10 years ago, said we're going to have a strange July and that many would fall in the fall and that around Christmas everyone would be happy. And for the last several years, a lot of them have been saying, I thought it was going to be this year, but there's something about 2026 that seems incredibly weird. So I don't know. I'm not sure what we're building towards, but I do think that they're preparing us or preparing Earth somehow for some big detrimental crash. I talked about how I think that there is a center block on the accelerator for the economy. I think we're getting really close to that for sure. I really do think that that's going to be coming close. I saw something yesterday. If you've ever heard of Nisara Jasara, I'm not going to get into it here, but you can go through and look it up. Nisara Jasara. This gal was talking to a higher up over at Wells Fargo. And again, this is just based on the video. So allegedly, but she was talking about how the banking employees are talking about actually going through and withdrawing and pulling cash out. Because, and the big thing is if and when, think about it just logistically. If the grid goes down, you have zero access to cash or gas or anything, okay? That's completely mutually exclusive and separate from the banking collapse. This is the grid goes down. This is everything. That's like big lever pulled, right? So if you don't have any cash, anything to barter, you're going to be kind of toast. So having cash on hand is going to be important, right? But the other thing is if the market collapses or if the U.S. dollar collapses, which it already is with inflation, I mean, we're seeing that to a pretty substantial degree, making sure that you have cash and more specifically hard assets that won't depreciate. A lot of people, refer to precious metals. I'm not telling you what to get. You can figure that out on your own. There's a lot of different resources that are out there. But unless you have just been not paying attention whatsoever, you'll know that your dollar is worth less because when you go to the grocery store, it doesn't buy as much. It's not so much that everything has gotten more expensive. It's that your dollar is actually worth less, right? So that same dollar doesn't purchase as much. It looks like that everything is more expensive. But even that in and of itself, you're starting to see people start to sway a little bit. They're getting that zombie sway to them. They're starting to get that desperation. And I think, if you look at a desperate person that is going to do anything and everything they can to protect their kids, I mean, you show me a desperate person like that, you show me a zombie, and I won't be able to tell the difference. I think that all of this has been set up to go through and to create the zombie apocalypse out of everyday people. You just take and take and take, and it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts until finally people snap. They just absolutely snap. I played a clip earlier this week that specifically talked about how people are really struggling day in and day out to just keep their heads above water, right? And so I think it's really important, again, to just reiterate what we talked about, to make sure that you are at bare minimum prepared for what you have, bare minimum prepared for just basic needs, your food, water. I lost my train of thought. Just basic needs, but also cash, maybe have some gold and silver. And the other thing is, too, don't keep it all in one spot. If you've got a cache of this stuff in your house, just understand those quote-unquote zombies are going to be out looking for it. So make sure that you're diversifying there as well. I know this is such doom and gloom. It's supposed to be a fun 20th episode, but, I guess anytime you talk about zombies, it's got to get a little weird. Because, again, 2 weeks, people in a civilized society are without power. It's crazy. In 2026, that they're living this. And again, a lot of the comments suggest that, hey, this is just a test run. Well, gosh, I feel like COVID was a test run. I feel like a lot of things that have occurred over the last 10 years have been a test run. 25 years, if you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, I'd be interested to think or hear what you think in the comments. What do you think? Do you think that the zombie apocalypse is going to be via a brain virus or some sort of a viral infection, or do you think that it's just going to be a product or result of a breakdown in just civilized society? I am inclined to think that it's the latter, because I think that at the end of the day, when you take away a civilized society, you take away the civility of man. I mean, we're going to do what we need to do to protect our families. And so that's kind of what it boils down to. So anyway, this is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode today. But I just wanted to, again, from the bottom of my heart, say thank you to everyone that has been here since the beginning. Like I said, today is the 20th episode, which I have been told by the podcasting people, I get the emails and stuff, that most podcasts don't make it past like 2 or 3 episodes. So I just really appreciate your time. I appreciate your comments and your emails, the DMs. I really do appreciate that. That's really cool. Here's to another 20 episodes. Here's to the show continuing to grow. Again, I'm working on co-hosts and kind of interviews and so forth in the background. But, especially because I've been doing radio for so long, I wasn't really sure what the structure of the show is going to look like. I do a lot of rants, as you know, if you've been following. But the structure of the show, I think, is going to start coming together, a little bit more as I bring on a co-host. So if you're interested, actually, I have been talking to a few people, but if you're interested in these types of topics, kind of the esoteric topics, let me know. You can reach out to me. I'm at realityhalfwayhouse@gmail.com. You can email me there. And I'd love to chat with you. The other thing is, I'm gonna have a single coming out this Sunday, so this is kind of a shameless plug for my music project. So I might come on a little bit on Sunday and kind of do like somewhat of a little bit of a preview party. Again, just kind of cross promotion. But I've got a single that's out that's kind of about this time. I talked a little bit about it on the last episode. It's called Rejected Silver. The band is Million Whispers. You can find them on Facebook and YouTube and so forth. I'll have a music video and some of those things out as well. So I'll probably pop back in here on Sunday as well, just to kind of talk a little bit about it. But again, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Again, 20 episodes in. I'm super grateful and super humbled. We are caught between worlds. This is the Reality Halfway House.